Her triumphs. I took a group of women that didn't believe in themselves, and I just believed in them. Her trials.
I never wanted to go to practice. I was losing a ton of weight.
Her story.
I just put my faith in God and just trusted the system.
Her why.
I want people to see what I did and say, oh, that's so awesome. I'm going to be better than that. That would be how I hope that this journey ends.
This is Her Why, where we tell the stories from BYU women's sports. Here is your host, Lauren McLean.
We're so glad you've joined us for Her Why, where we celebrate the women who make BYU sports great. Joining me today are Natalie Brookman and Brogan Evanson, two former BYU gymnasts who are shaping the next generation of Cougars as assistant coaches for the BYU gymnastics team. Thank you so much for being here with me, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Good to have you. Let's talk about this season so far. From the outside, the team's record doesn't look great, but the scores have been improving since the beginning of the season. So, Natalie, how do you feel about how this season is going so far?
It's been a really different year. We're seeing just a shift in scoring throughout the country. So it's been an adjustment with just managing expectations. But as far as the team goes, I think that as we continue down this path, we're just seeing great performances and celebrating that. So I'm pretty happy. I feel like there's a lot left to put on the floor this season.
You talk about shifts in scoring. Is that just the judges are looking for different things than they normally do? What does that mean exactly?
We're in a system where the judges are just being held a little bit more accountable for their scores this year. And so they're being careful about scoring. And so we're having to dial in and make the adjustments that they're seeing. And it's just new. I think we saw scores start to be kind of inflated over the last few years, just lots of 10s being thrown out for routines that maybe weren't. And now it's being dialed back. And so we're just focused on their performances and just continuing to develop through the season.
The team has faced a challenging schedule so far this season, competing against several top-ranked programs, Oklahoma, Auburn, Utah, Oregon State. Brogan, what's it like facing such high-level competition and are pretty early in the season?
Yeah, it's been exciting. This team is a hard-working team. They love the sport and they love each other, so it's been a really fun team to travel with and compete with and see their growth. I think one of the things about this team in particular is a lot of the leadership are like one eventers or two eventers. And that's maybe not what we've had in the past. We've usually, kind of have someone that's competing everything and they're leading, as a senior with a lot of experience. And so these one eventers, I'm starting to see them figure out their role as, okay, I provide, this floor routine or this beam routine, but this is how I lead. And so as a coach, trying to pull that out of them and say, this is your role and this is how you can strengthen us, that's been really fun to see them start to get some confidence there. So I think we're gaining momentum, which is exciting.
I think that's probably huge, having the athletes be the leaders and the motivators for the other girls. But I'm curious what you guys do when the meets don't turn out like the athletes would hope. How do you keep them motivated to keep going and keep improving?
Yeah, I think Coach Gard is really good about helping us find the positives. That's something he started doing a handful of years ago. And so we really do focus on what went well. And in gymnastics, where you're just getting scrutinized the whole time of all your mistakes or deductions, it's focusing on what I did good. So just keeping them focused on what went well and then how are we going to make adjustments moving forward.
Natalie, BYU's already faced Utah twice this season. How much does the rivalry exist in gymnastics compared to other sports where it's huge at BYU?
Well, it exists, and we respect that Utah is a legendary program and that they have years and years of national championships. And because of that, they're able to recruit fantastic gymnasts, Olympians, world championship team members. So we respect that about Utah. And at the same time, when you get to this level, things kind of even out.
Yeah.
And it's really our routine up against theirs. And with any big team, I remember being in Oklahoma a few years ago, we just said, let's go head to head. Let's go routine for routine. They're going to do a great routine and they're going to score really well. And we already know that about them. But we can also put up great routines. And I think that the more experience we have with these big teams who are legendary, the more our girls start to believe that they can do this and that their best is right up there with the best in the country. So
It becomes less of a intimidation factor. The more you face them, probably it's like, oh, well, we're right there with these guys.
and a lot of them are girls that our girls grew up with and trained with, and the margins are so small in this sport that a quarter of a tenth is the difference between a winning routine and not. And so, like Brogan said, we can celebrate the good things that are happening and respect what's happening on the other side of the gym as well. So,
such a crazy sport that way. Honestly, one little toe, right, can make the difference. The last time BYU beat Utah in gymnastics was in '98. Natalie, you were on the team. What do you remember about that meet specifically?
I honestly don't remember. I don't know if I fell, if I probably didn't if we beat Utah, but I don't remember the meet so much, but I do remember standing on the floor at the end of the meet and hearing that announcement. And of course, we all went crazy because they are a reputable team, and to have it happen in the Marriott Center was really fun. And like Brogan said, we have a team of girls who love each other, and you just become like sisters to each other. And these women see each other through all the ups and all the downs. And so when you have a moment like that, it's just fun to celebrate and relish in it just a little bit.
Absolutely. We've seen some standout performances from your gymnastics team this season. Kylie Iquinto, who competes in the all-around, and Brinley Anderson, who won the Big 12 Event Specialist of the Week for 2 weeks in a row. Brogan, what have you noticed from these two this season that have made them perform so well?
They love gymnastics. They love everything about gymnastics, and they're super competitive girls. So they put in the training. They, pay attention to the details. They do the work in the off season, and then when it's their turn up, they just go all out. So they go big.
I love that. Is it a matter of confidence has to be huge in gymnastics, because you can have probably the most athletic woman, right? But if you don't have that confidence in you're doing so many tricky things, that just has to be such a huge factor, right?
Yeah. I think their mindset comes a little more naturally to them. Some athletes, we work really hard on their mindset. What are they going to think about? How are they going to go big? How are they going to, trust their training?
Yeah.
And I think in particular, Kylie and Brinley, that just comes a little more naturally for them. They've done that, through high school. And so they have that competitive experience that really adds up.
Natalie, in coaching, you have to know the girls so well, their strengths and their weaknesses. How do you help play to the athlete's strengths in these different events?
Well, it's a little bit like motherhood. Like, your kids better than they know themselves sometimes, right? And sometimes, when you brought up Kylie and Brinley, they both have incredible leadership capability. And they've both grown into that and are continuing to grow into that. And so it's not just about their gymnastics performance, but it's what they do for this team outside of that. And I think that our role as coaches is to help them see that and put them in positions to own that leadership capability. And we're seeing that a lot from those two in particular this year as well. We have a leadership council of 6 women that are really unique and different in many ways, and they lead differently. And so our job is just to help them see that and capitalize on it and own it. And of course, those two do it in the gym. They're leading in the gym, and they're leading at meets, and they're leading in the way that they train themselves and by example and all those things. So our job is just to help them have the confidence to speak up and use their voice and lead the way that they naturally do.
The Leadership Council, is that a new thing, or is that something that's been happening for a long time?
It's new this year. We're actually really excited about it. And we've played with different ways of having team captains over the years. We've had event captains. We've had just solid, like you're our 2 captains. This year, we just have a group that, like I said, they all have different strengths. And so we thought, why not? We're going to put them in a room and we're going to give them some training, which was so awesome early in the preseason, and then help them to know that they have a voice and that the way that they lead is important to our team.
And you've seen a difference?
I think so. I do. We, like Brogan said, we even have one-eventers who are on that leadership council. And in the past, I don't think we would have made a one-eventer a captain, but because they have influence over the team in a certain way, we felt like that was important. And I think that they're a tight group because of it.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And obviously kind of in the experimental phase in year one, but I think that's incredible. Brogan, as the primary vault and floor coach and Natalie is the beam coach, how do you two collaborate in your coaching? How do you guys overlap? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we work really independently trying to find the right composition for our events. But, I mean, we're coaching the same girls.
Right.
So it's actually fun sometimes saying, oh, I'm struggling with this. She's really having a hard time with this skill. And, you know, Natalie will say, oh, yeah, she does that same thing on balance beam. She twists early. Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, she's twisting early. So how are we both going to help her, you know, make that correction? Because the skills overlap for sure. So it's collaboration and how to help the individual girls. And then other times, it's a fresh set of eyes. You know, Natalie knows great gymnastics. So she can come over and say, what are you seeing with that? That is not what I'm seeing. And it's nice to get kind of a fresh perspective on, oh, you're right. Because you, as the coach, when you're working with them day to day, you see the growth. You know, you say, her leap is so much better than where we started 3 months ago. But then when the fresh set of eyes sees it, you're like, oh, but it's still not quite where we need it. So it's collaboration like that.
There's also collaboration in how different coaches work with different women. And I think I watch Brogan and she can say to me, oh, this is something I've tried with her, or this is a discussion that I've had with her that has helped her. And then I'm like, oh, I'll take that and use that on beam as well. Like, oh, if she's feeling insecure about this or that, then that's good for me to know. And so sometimes our conversations go that way and we can help the individual just because of watching how another coach is doing it. So
what's your guys' approach during meets? Are you focused mainly on your own events? Or is there a lot of crossover between coaching responsibilities? I mean, you mentioned it a little bit, but like during the meet specifically, what are you guys focusing on the most?
We all have our own little jobs at different places. You know, on vault, there's a lot of things to do to make sure the settings are correct and the vault number, which gives the judge a heads up on what the vault's going to be. Like there's all sorts of things that we have to do to kind of assist. Behind the scenes as coaches, we're always making sure the composition was seen correctly by the judge. So if there's mistakes on a judging end, we're filling out forms for each other saying, hey, judge, take a second look at this. You might have missed this connection or, you know, why was the score here? So that's a lot. My role at the meets is kind of like making sure those beam routines were seen correctly and helping.
I'm usually the one freaking out, like, look at that score. It's not correct. And then they're taking care of it behind the scenes so I can focus on my next competitor.
Yeah. But I feel like a lot of people don't know what happens behind the scenes in gymnastics, right? We're just watching these events. So that is really interesting. So you guys, if you see something that you feel like is scored incorrectly, you fill out a form and then you take it and they rewatch it. And does the score change during the meet or is it later?
It can change during the meet. And then we also have the option to do a video review if we need to, if we're disagreeing with what the judges say that they saw. So it kind of goes on and on. But I would say, like, on our individual events, we are the primary coaches. And I'm grateful for that autonomy to have my girls know my voice and have me there. And I know that Guard and Brogan stand back. On vault, you know, I try to just kind of be a cheerleader. I'm down there just like getting their vault numbers ready, but I'm just cheering at that point. And same with Ward and Guard on their events.
You guys have to have some sharp eyes, man, to see those little things that are happening during there. Brogan is the vault and floor coach and team choreographer. How do you balance creativity with the technical demands of the floor routines?
Oh, I mean, technically, I hope I'm improving every year. You know, you said, how do you have those eyes to see it? Well, we've watched a lot of gymnastics. We've seen just, you know, how many cartwheels have we seen in our lifetime? Yeah. So you start to be able to see the difference. Yeah. So technically, I think I just get better with each athlete that comes in. And as a college coach, it's so cool because you get girls from different coaches. Mm-hmm. So this girl, wow, she vaults so well. And you start to see, oh, wow, her coach taught her how to hurdle really good. Mm-hmm. And so I just pick up on all the things that they bring to me. So that's pretty fun. Creatively, that actually gets harder the older I get because I'm not in, you know, what's
you're like, I don't know if you can do the gritty during your performance. I don't know. Sure.
I try. But, you know, I mean, I feel like the way that we keep it fresh at BYU is we depend on these amazing athletes, 18, 19, 20-year-olds that are right there in the middle of all things cool. And we just let them bring what they can. And then I just guide them more and more of like, okay, we're going to appeal to your parents, to the college students, to the judges, to gymnastics professionals and the person that this is their first meet. So I just try to take all the good things they can bring. And then that keeps us, I think, fresh and exciting because they've got so many great ideas.
For example, like the Barbie girl routine.
Yeah.
That went viral. You had a big hand in that, didn't you?
That was so fun.
So did she bring that to you, like this idea, and then you're like, all right, let's run with it?
Yeah, so Rebecca had been around for a while to see. We had done a surfer girl routine with Shannon Evans, which turned into a year later the Mario routine, which was such a hit and so much fun. She had seen Napoleon Dynamite that had come to life. So she had kind of like seen a couple of her teammates kind of, I like doing character routines.
Yeah.
I think it's really fun for the crowd. So she had seen that a few times. And so she came to me like, okay, Brogan, what are we going to do? She's so fun. She's such a character herself. And I'm like, okay, so we had some ideas going. And she actually came back to me, Brogan, I had been talking to my roommate, or it was a friend of hers, and what do you think about Barbie? And I'm like, oh, I'm sold. That's definitely what we're doing. So, yeah, together we brainstormed a lot of fun things. And finding the music is really the key because those sounds have to come to life for the audience to believe it. But then she matched it with, her facial
incredible.
And her actions and her funny things. So
I love that. There's so much that goes into that, but those are the most fun to watch.
Yeah, they're very memorable for sure.
Natalie, you're the primary beam coach,
Yes.
which I'm not going to lie is the event that scares me the most, even watching. I'm like, please be careful. But what do you think,
too.
what makes up a great beam routine?
I think I preach to my beam team that the best beamers in the world are not perfect. They are adaptable. And so that's what we train and that's what we preach. And they're just having to make little adjustments in split-second moments. I mean, if they're just a tiny bit off or their hip is a little bit open, or then they have to be able to bring that back to the 4-inch beam. So I think that's what we train for, is just to be adaptable.
We had Elise Rollins on the show last year, and she talked about her experience getting over some of those anxieties on beam. So how do you specifically help some of these athletes to build the confidence in such a high-pressure event? I mean, you mentioned that you're like, it's okay, little tweaks here and there, but like, what are some specific things that you do to kind of block out those lights, like you were mentioning, and the crowd, and focus on what they're doing?
Well, I think having examples like Elise is a great thing, because these women that are on my team right now, they see Elise as a beam queen. And they remember her scoring 995s and 10s, and they think she was just awesome. But she came as a freshman and barely could walk across the beam in competition without physically shaking. And so it just comes with time and with practice and with a lot of mental work. And then the other thing we talk a lot about, we call it ticks in the box. And we just say every turn you take is like a dash mark on the board, right? Like, I took that turn, it was perfect. I took that turn, it wasn't perfect, but I learned something. I took that turn, and I did that 100,000,000 times.
Yeah.
And then when I get into competition, I can trust that I have this body of work that I can rely on and I can be confident in. And so it hasn't all been perfect, and it may not be perfect tonight, but I can trust the training.
Yeah. Natalie, how much influence do you have on the beam routines that these girls do?
When I first got to BYU, I tried to kind of start choreographing everyone's routines. And what I learned really quickly is that the way that I move is different than the way other people move. And the background that they might have in dance or even skill work is different than mine. And so I pretty much let them choreograph their own routine, and then I go back in and change things, and I tweak, and I just say, we need more of this, or we need to pick up the rhythm here, or that pose doesn't look exactly right on you. Let's shift. But other than that, I let them help each other. Some of them go back to club coaches who know them really well, and they know their style. And then they have a routine put together by the time they come in the fall, and then we start tweaking. So.
Wow, that's really cool. That puts a lot of responsibility on them too.
It does.
To come
and
up with
it
something.
makes it theirs.
Yeah.
And I want them to be as comfortable in their own skin as they can be up on the beam. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Brogan, as someone who's been an NCAA judge, you understand the routines, how they're scored at the highest level. How do you help these athletes kind of maximize their scores while keeping their confidence high?
Yeah. I feel like I've it ebbs and flows with what the athletes need to know about that. Sometimes they really do just need to know you're getting 3 tenths off because you keep doing that.
Right.
And that's sometimes enough for them to say, oh, okay, let me just understand the rules a little better. And we can get the best score just by following the rules perfectly. And then other times it's like, this is an impressionable person, taking deductions based on how they feel and think about you. So how are you going to, sell to them that you're the best gymnast on the floor? So, judging is an interesting thing. We definitely respect our judges, and we know they put in a lot of work to doing the jobs that they do, and we're so grateful because we don't have a sport without judges, really.
Right.
But at the same time, they're just there taking in the experience like everybody else, and it's how do they feel at the end of the day about what you did up there? And so that's kind of fun too, because I think that the athletes feel like, oh, I have some control over this. Yeah. And I'm just going to make them believe that I'm, the best thing they've ever seen. So judging I became a judge because my college coach, Dawn Cattermole, had been a judge, and she coached me a lot that way, where she'd say, you got this deduction, and you were like, oh, yeah, that's what I'm doing, is I'm trying to make sure, I skip the deduction part. So having that foundation just helps me as a coach to really see it through a different pair of eyes, which I think is super great.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll have more from BYU Gymnastics Associate Head Coach Natalie Brookman and Assistant Coach Brogan Evanson. This is Her Why. Hey, Cougar fans, this is Lauren McLean. We have some amazing shows here at BYU Radio, including the Big Stories podcast, where host Cleon Wall shares real-life stories from the Big 12 and beyond. Last season, Cleon brought you stories about TCU point guard Darius Ford, who went from homeless teen to college hoopster. And Kansas play-by-play announcer Brian Haney shared how he found meaning in his life by organizing a basketball tournament to raise money for kids with cancer. This season, the podcast traveled to Tucson, Waco, Houston, and other cities to bring you more amazing and inspiring tales. So check out Big Stories wherever you find podcasts or on the BYU Radio app. Welcome back to Her Why. I'm Lauren McLean, continuing my conversation with BYU gymnastic coaches Natalie Brookman and Brogan Evanson. Let's go back in time a little bit. I feel like gymnastics is one of the very first sports little kids are put in because it teaches you so much about how to control your body and so many great things. So when did you two start in gymnastics? Natalie, let's start with you.
My family had just moved to Arizona, and my mom knew I was a bouncer. I was cartwheeling down the grocery store aisles, and she thought we need to get her in a gym. And so I started at Arizona Twisters in Mesa, Arizona when I was 7 years old. And I remember I went in and had my first day with my little cousin. And at the end of that first class, the head coach walked over to my mom and she said, "How tall is Natalie's dad?" And she just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to be really like 6'4", Yeah. And she said, "Well, he's 5'10". And she said, "Okay, we'd like to move her into a little hotshot group." And that was kind of the beginning of it. And then just up through the levels from there. So, and I stayed at that gym my whole life until I was 18 and left for college. So that was home.
That is so funny to me because normally in athletics, it's like, tell me your dad's really tall. Tell me your mom and dad are really tall. That's what you want. In gymnastics, it's the opposite.
Opposite, for sure.
What about for you, Brogan? How'd you get started in gymnastics?
My mom was a dancer through college. So my sister and I were in dance. We had a lot of fun. We danced at 3, the San Francisco 49ers football game and all sorts of stuff. That was kind of what my mom thought we would do. But then we moved to Hawaii. My parents bought a business in Maui, Hawaii. And they didn't quite have the same type of dance opportunities that Utah did. And my mom kept seeing all these articles about this gymnastics club there that was traveling to the mainland and doing all these amazing things. And my mom's like, that's where I want my daughter somewhere where they get lots of opportunities. And so at 5, we switched from dance to gymnastics, and I just fell in love. I just loved flipping, and I mean, dance is obviously a big part of my life, but I loved kind of competition that way and the big tricks. So,
So how long did you guys live in Maui? I mean, you had to travel back and forth, right?
Yes, at the time I was 5 when we moved there, and we moved back to Utah when I was about 13. Okay. So we lived there full time for 8 years or so. And then my parents actually still owned that company all the way until I was about 23. So we kind of lived in 2 places. We went to school and, gymnastics. I was Olympus Gymnastics in Salt Lake was where I trained through my upper levels of gymnastics. But I still every summer would run on the beach and lift weights at Gold's Gym. So
not a bad life.
It was awesome.
Not a bad upbringing.
No.
Did either of you have Olympic aspirations when you were growing up? Natalie, we'll start with you.
I don't know if I was ever aspiring for the Olympics, but when I was 12, I became an elite gymnast. And so I went down that path of competing on the U.S. national team and being part of that world. And it was intense and high level, and I loved it. I remember my mom once telling me, the minute you don't love this anymore, we're done. Yeah. And I remember feeling such relief because it's such a huge investment financially and with time and for the entire family. And just to know that I was doing this because I loved it, and the minute that I didn't anymore, we could be finished. And of course, I never finished. I'm still here, but it was just my childhood. I grew up in a gym, so.
So you were competing around these other, or I guess even training with these other girls that had Olympic aspirations. Yeah. Did you ever train with one who actually ended up becoming an Olympian?
I was on the national team with several that were Olympians, the whole Kim Zmeskal and Carrie Strug era, Amanda Borden. They were my age. And so, we did camps together and all of those things. But those were girls who had moved away from home. Yeah. And they were very dialed in on, I want to make the Olympics. And at some point you have to choose. I mean, if I'm ranked 17th in the country, I'm probably not making the Olympic team, as awesome as 17th is. Right. But chose that college path and never looked back. I knew that that's where I wanted to be. So,
Brogan, what about for you? Did you have Olympic aspirations as a kid?
Oh, yeah, of course. I don't know many gymnasts that don't, in terms of you watch the Olympics and you're like, that's what I want to do. I watched Kim Zmeskal compete, and her floor routine to me is like ingrained in my mind of the 3 whip backs into her double back and the fun, swing music that she had. So that was a big impression on me. I think probably around 12 or 13, I realized I did not have the flexibility to be an Olympic gymnast. I was a very unflexible gymnast. Strength was always my thing. But I mean...
Sounds like an oxymoron. Yeah. Unflexible gymnast.
But being in Salt Lake City as a high-level club gymnast, I mean, I watched the Utes compete. And so seeing the program there, kind of like Natalie said, I had many goals, and college gymnastics was one of them. And then over time, that really became where I was focused. And, all my dreams did come true into gymnastics in terms of the excitement and the fun that I was able to have. So,
well, now I want to know how you both ended up choosing BYU to continue your career collegiately, because I'm sure you had a lot of different opportunities, a lot of different places you could go. So what made BYU the place for you, Natalie?
Well, both of my parents and both of my older siblings had been to BYU, and it was actually the last place I ever wanted to come. I had grown up, like my parents brought us on vacation to BYU and showed us where they went to the Cougar Eat and where they went to classes and where my dad proposed to my mom. And so it was kind of ingrained in us. We are a BYU family. We are true blue. And I loved BYU, but I knew I didn't want to compete here because I felt like I had opportunities to do gymnastics at a higher level in other places. I ended up actually committing to LSU. And then I actually had a different coach who knew me from home, who pulled me aside and said, that's a poor decision for you. He knew my family and he knew my values, and he said, you don't belong at LSU and you won't do well there. And I, at the moment, didn't know what to do with that because I was 17, but ultimately, it was one of the greatest conversations I've ever had because he did know me and I respected him so much that it made me reconsider. And I ended up calling my brother who had returned home from a mission and just said, I don't know what to do. I thought I had made a really wise choice. And he said, this is an easy choice, Nat. Go to BYU. And I said, I don't want to go to BYU. They don't have a top-ranked gymnastics team. And that's my blinders were on. That's all I could see. Yeah. And he just said one thing. He said, Natalie, there's no other university in the world like BYU. And I just remember, and I still get emotional, but I remember that I just had goosebumps go up my arms. And I immediately picked up the phone and called Brad Cattermole and said, I'm coming to BYU.
And Brad was probably like, what?
Well, he was just like, okay, and I was like, no, this was a big deal for me to make that shift. But it actually shaped my life to make that decision because I learned really, really quickly that my experience at BYU was not going to be only about gymnastics. And I had a great career at BYU and loved my gymnastics experience, but it was about so much more than athletics for me.
Well, you definitely elevated that program with your competition here. You were an All-American, broke the school all-around record in 1999. So when you look back at your time at BYU, what stands out to you the most?
Well, I'll say that I came in with a group of freshmen that were great gymnasts, but also great people. And I'm still very close to those 4 girls today. And we've raised our families in different places, but we stay connected. And, there's an All-American banner in the gym with my picture. And that's great for my mom to come in and see. And it's part of my history. But what I take with me are the relationships. And to still be close to those teammates and to see them living lives that are in line with the gospel and raising families and sending their kids on missions. And those kind of relationships run really, really deep. And then my relationships with my coaches as well here, they were like second parents to me. And we lost Brad Cattermole just about 1.5 years ago. And he was so influential in my life. And I have good, strong parents, but being away from home and having that kind of influence meant the world. And so I would say that's what I take from my experience here. And of course, I got an education, and of course, I have some gymnastics accolades, but that's most important to me.
Oh, I love that so much. So powerful. Yes, Mark was Brad. Mark's his son, who I grew up with, but Brad was an incredible man. Loved Dawn as well. Brogan, let's talk with you about that. How did you end up choosing BYU and the Cougars to pursue your collegiate career?
Yeah. Like I mentioned a few times, I grew up in Salt Lake, so Utah was right there in my face all the time. And that was really a big part of me wanting to be a college gymnast and to do the best I could. So that was definitely a place I was considering, and there was a lot of other schools. My parents were like, whatever you want. Yeah. And that was like the worst thing. No, just tell me what to do. So I took a lot of time in the recruiting process. Just what are all the possibilities and where could I go and what would that be like? And I had just a lot of great experiences visiting campuses. And, there's so many great gymnastics coaches out there that really do take care of their athletes and really help them athletically. I think at the end of the day, when I was on BYU's campus, it's just where I felt at home. Yeah. With the teammates, with the coaches. I could picture myself walking to class. I could picture myself hanging out on Friday night, and I just felt at home. And really, I did make the right choice for me. Yeah. It was just a place where I could develop all the parts of me, yes. Spiritually, especially going to religion classes and getting that perspective of the gospel was a really important thing to me, and still is. Like, I feel like the things I value now came from those choices that I made back when I was 17 years old. And academically, it's one of the best schools in the country in terms of the education and the preparation going to grad school and beyond. Like, it just set me up for all the things I wanted. And great people, just so many great teammates and coaches and people that just made my life rich. Yeah. So
Brogan, you scored a perfect 10 on your floor routine in 2003, which is a rare and really cool achievement. What do you remember about that moment and that routine specifically?
I remember it being a blast. I remember being surprised, like, really? You gave that a 10? And it was a great routine and it felt great. But I also I just remember my family being in the stands and my teammates building me up for that opportunity. You know, as a coach, we talk a lot about, you know, this is a team sport and you're kind of setting each other up for the next great score. And I had teammates that had set me up. Even back to Natalie's team that had done some great gymnastics for years before that, you know, the kind of the momentum that the program had at the time, just a lot of great people supporting me and then, you know, having some fun in the moment and putting all that practice to use. So I just remember it being a little bit of a surprise, like, did that actually just happen?
Wow.
And, you know, it was awesome.
Pretty incredible. And I love that you mentioned how the team sport of gymnastics works, because it's one of those interesting ones where it's very individual, right? Your performance is very individual, and yet you're scored as a team in the end as well. But I like that you mentioned you kind of set your team up, right? It's just that momentum from one to the next and
it's hard for your teammate to go 9-6 in front of you and then the judge give you a 10 next.
Right.
But if you have a teammates going 9-9, 9-9-2-5, 9-9-5 in front of you, and you just give it a little bit extra, they're like, we're got to give her a 10. You know?
I love that so much. Natalie, you mentioned that after gymnastics at BYU, you worked in the athletic department for a little bit. At what point did you decide you wanted to start becoming a coach in the gymnastics field?
Yeah, I was at BYU, finished with my degree. My husband was 2 years behind me in his schooling, and so Brad was actually very instrumental in getting me a job to work with Elaine Michaelis and Ann Valentine. And these are legendary coaches and athletic directors at BYU. And I learned so much in those 2 years of just working in athletics about the inner workings of athletics and compliance and the things we do to run championships and those kind of things. So that was really fun. And then Dave graduated from UVU and we moved back to Arizona and started having little babies and entering that phase of life. And I missed being in the gym. And so I think I literally started coaching just to get out of the house for a few hours, a couple nights a week, and just kept my foot in it through the years. And as my daughter got old enough to need good coaching in gymnastics, we moved to a gym where I could do more and more of it. And then this opportunity at BYU opened up. So just years of staying in it and loving the sport, and it kept me around, I guess.
What made you want to come back to BYU as a coach?
Well, I mean, it's BYU, right? And I wasn't pursuing college coaching opportunities. It was a situation where Don and Brad resigned. They were going to hire a new coach. And I thought, why would I not put my hat in the ring? That's like the dream job, right? Like if I could be BYU's beam coach. And actually, Brad Cattermole and I had joked about that so many times. Like, when are you going to hire me to be your beam coach? And of course, he had Shauna Mertz here who was doing a great job. And that wasn't going to happen. But when this shift happened, we made that a matter of prayer. And we didn't get an immediate answer. It was about a 2-week process of thinking and praying and gut-wrenching, like, are we going to leave everything we've built here in Arizona? Yeah. Our kids are settled here. We're happy in our home and near my parents. And when it came down to it, we got an answer to prayer and made this move. And it's been a beautiful chapter of our life. We love it. I mean, it's BYU. My kids have been able to be part of this culture. I remember walking back into the field house and just seeing the lights on and thinking, this is my place. This place has my heart, you know, and some really formative years of my life happened in this place. And so I just feel very grateful that that opportunity fell into my lap and that I get to share that with my family. And
And 10 years later, no regrets.
No.
10 years,
so
right?
Happy. 10 years. That's so long. We've been here a long time now.
We're old.
That is weird, because I remember when Guard got hired in the two of you. I can't believe it's already been 10 years. Let's talk about you, Brogan. What What was it like for you transitioning from competing in gymnastics and then becoming a coach?
Yeah. I think it was probably around my junior or senior year where I started realizing, like, I want to coach this. I'm never going to be done with this. I love this. And that was actually hard for me to admit out loud, most to myself.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, the coaches were the hardcore people that, as a little kid, I'm not going to be like that when I grow up because they're making you climb the rope or do the 100 push-ups or whatever. So it was kind of, as I was wrapping up my own competitive career, that I was like, can I really say that I want to be a coach? And eventually I did, and then that's kind of that's where all my choices led to, was how am I going to be a good coach? So out of my own career, I coached at BYU as a student coach for a year as I finished up my degree. And then I went out on the road looking for a college job, like right away. I got luckily hired out of a school called Southeast Missouri State in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And my boss was Tom Farden, who was the longtime Utah head coach.
Okay.
And so we got to work together for several years. And I just had so much fun working with college-aged athletes and helping them, do a lot of the things that I got to do. I was married somewhere in there. And then we moved back to Colorado, which is where my husband's family is from, or where they have their roots. And so I coached club out there and was doing a lot of the officiating and judged some college during those years. And we started having kids, and it was like, okay, we'll just cut down on those coaching hours so I can be the kind of mom that I want to be. And when I was at my lowest amount of coaching hours, I think I was only in the gym like 5 hours a week. That is when the BYU coaching opportunity came up. And I'm like, I'm going to go from all the hours I've cut back on now to full force with a college, opportunity. But, I just wanted to say yes. And I have the best husband. He was so supportive. And and Brogan, I knew this when I married you, that you wanted that. Yeah. So I guess we're going to Utah.
Brogan came here with tiny, tiny, tiny kids too. Like my youngest was 5 when we started this. And so that was hard for a few years until he got to be more independent. But Brogan has literally raised her children here at BYU and has had babies, and has had years where she's had to travel with a newborn, and it has not been easy. Like, all the respect to Brogan for that.
Well,
not easy.
Yeah.
That's been good help.
Would your kids hang out in the gym? Like, would they ever? How does that work?
Gardy is so good. He is such a good, loving person to kids, I would say. But for me, I can't work and be a mom at the same time. Like, I can't, because I can't have my kid running across the floor when I'm trying to be a good coach. Right. So it's more of a personal preference of, no, when I'm working, and when I'm the mom.
Yeah.
So I think you have to find your own groove that way. Absolutely. For me, it was better to have a nanny. We've had nannies that have helped us through the last 10 years get kids where they need to go. And, so far my kids seem to be happy and thriving. So we'll just keep going with that. It is
fun, like, to have my kids know the team the way that the Cattermole's kids knew us, and we knew them. And so even my youngest, he's 14 now, he comes into the gym and he thinks he's big stuff because the college girls will talk to him and ask him about his life and stuff. So that part of it is fun. They're pretty connected to our team.
Yeah.
They probably think that is the coolest. Like, I think of myself as a little girl. If my mom was doing that, I'd be like, oh, my mom is the coolest person on the planet. I think
I have to tell you, I was I picked my daughter up from gymnastics. She's 6, and we had to run in the grocery store, and she had a leotard on, and she's like, Mom, I don't want anyone in the store to see my leotard. And I'm like, why? She's like, because they'll want my autograph. And so they maybe don't know what it's like not to have a mom that's coaching. They don't know the difference.
They may want my autograph. That is the cutest thing I've ever heard. That is so awesome. I want to end with this with you guys. We'll start with Natalie. What has been the most rewarding part about being able to come back and coach these beautiful and incredible athletes at BYU?
The most rewarding part, I think it kind of ties in with just what is my coaching philosophy. And I think that I'm a person that leans into very high expectations, which I've learned over the years, the women on my team interpret as high belief in them. And so just being able to have very high expectations and let them know what they're capable of and convince them of that, and then work with them as individuals. I think that like high expectations plus working around individual needs, because they are all so unique, yields a high output. And so it's fun to have those moments where somebody actually believes that they can do this and they've done what it takes to get there. And they know that at that point, we're just cheering. Like, we've done the hard work, but we are your number one cheerleader. And I always feel like that when we're competing and somebody lands a beam dismount and I'm just like, yeah. Because I'm like, they did it. They did it in the moment, and they've done what they've trained for, and they've met that expectation. And that's the high yield moment where you're like, okay, that's, in 20 years, that's what they're going to be talking to somebody about on some podcast about how they had this moment that meant something to them because they made it happen. So I think that that's the most rewarding part for me.
One of the coolest things to watch about gymnastics is how the teammates and coaches react after, they stick a routine or something like that. And that's cool to know. It's because you guys know everything that went into that particular moment, and you're right there with them. So I love that. Brogan, what about for you? What has been the most rewarding part for you being a coach on this team?
Yeah, I think Nat said it so well. It's those kind of like moments where they'll be solidified in time in terms of, look at what I put into this and look what I got out of it. And sometimes it's not the highest scoring routine. There was a beam routine just this last Saturday where, whoa, that girl did it and she knows she did it, and she didn't know if she could, but she hoped she could, and then it came together. And I just love those moments of growth that you see these girls just kind of go, oh, I can do anything I put my mind to. And, last year at our team banquet, I kind of had like that same high yield moment that Natalie said, where you're like, oh my gosh, these women are incredible. Do you remember when they came as freshmen and they couldn't even, like find the training room down the hall and get there on time? And now just the things that they've accomplished and just who they know they are,
Yes.
Like children of God with all the potential in the world, and they have the power with their actions to make their dreams come true, whatever that might be in a floor routine in front of a Marriott Center crowd, or, as an engineer or as a doctor or whatever it is that they're pursuing, or just, in their family that they're building here, as they date and figure out what they want out of life. So there's a lot of those moments every year, especially during competition season, where you just see these amazing girls, become women and figure out who they are. And it's fun.
It's a beautiful thing. I love that so much. I'm here with Natalie Brookman and Brogan Evanson, assistants for the BYU gymnastics team. You two are incredible athletes, incredible coaches, and mothers. Thank you so much for taking the time with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks to Annie Robinson and Sydney Simpson for producing this episode with senior producer Cleon Wall. Her Why is a production of BYU Radio.